I'm Marcelino Benito. For 3 years, Harris County Judge Hidalgo and her office were embroiled in a high-stakes political saga. In 2022, then Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg pursued criminal charges against 3 of Hidalgo's staffers, accusing them of allegedly steering an $11 million COVID outreach contract to a preferred vendor. Now, in February 2025, those charges have been dropped, but the bills to cover this year's long investigation need to be paid. Judge Hidalgo sitting down for her first one-on-one interview with me to discuss this now defunct investigation, its impact, and why she believes she was politically targeted by the now former DA. It's been a little over 2 weeks since the charges against 2 of your staffers were dismissed, and then obviously we heard about your former chief of staff who took a deal, not accepting responsibility for anything, no guilt, no admission of guilt. So it has been 2 to 3 weeks since this came out. Why is it important for you to address this again now?
Look, first of all, I want to address this word deal. So obviously, my former chief of staff, it was a delayed dismissal, and it just means he's going to have to wait 6 months for the dismissal to be official. But certainly, I noticed, for example, DA Kim Ogg said that there had been multiple pleas. There were absolutely no pleas, and she also said something about her having some evidence that will never come to light. Of course, if there had been evidence, why didn't she present it? Why didn't the AG present it? So really, that's my reason for wanting to talk about this again, is that I think it's been going on for so long that the news was, okay, case is dismissed, but we haven't had an opportunity to sit back and think, okay, what just happened? We had a district attorney come after 3 innocent people for over 3 years at an enormous cost to taxpayers, misleading the press and the community. And I want to really get into, what that has meant, what that means for taxpayers, and also just thinking about how we can be better aware and more careful of this in the future.
At that press conference back on February 6th, and throughout this whole process, really, you've addressed this and called this a political prosecution. Why is it your opinion and your belief that the former DA was targeting you and your team?
I've always thought it was about my my political career. Obviously, that started during my reelection year, and oftentimes when there's an investigation, you don't hear much about it. That's the law, right? All the details of the proceedings, other than the trial, the subpoenas, the conferences, particular details. All of that is done in the privacy of the justice system, so as not to bias anything. Not only did this begin right as my re-election campaign was launching, but she made it a point to leak something about the cases and the investigations every week. It was like a drumbeat every Friday, and it would often be things that were completely exaggerated. For example, one of the latest things she leaked was that one of my staff members had failed to turn over certain documents. And so that was, all over the news. And then we sent the receipts, here is the email, here is the thumb drive where we sent in all the documents. But by then she'd gotten the headline. And so it was really kind of drilling into people this idea that there was some sort of malfeasance going on in the office, which obviously wasn't there. I also think, and this is something that we have not talked about enough, that became just so incredibly, it is so obvious, it's almost unbelievable, is as it turns out, when you manage to get into the DA's office and see her books, and they worked really hard to keep us from doing that. We had to go through the county auditor's office as opposed to a normal public information request. You realize that the person she hired to lead these investigations, who charged the county 6 figures, is Rachel Hooper. Now, Rachel Hooper is an attorney who at the time was the lead attorney in Texas for the Republican Party. Obviously, I was running for a very prominent Democratic seat. And the final piece is the outcome of all of this. So, she sends the cases to General Paxton, by no means a friend of Democrats in Texas or Harris County or nationally. And you better believe if there had been something there, he would have done something with it. He would have found it. He would have sought some sort of conviction. And so it's a lot of smart people in the DA's office. I believe Kim Ogg is also a smart person, and so for her to have continued this, that was completely meritless. There's just no other explanation than a desire to harm me, to harm my career, and unfortunately, she did that at the cost of the reputation and lives of three young, brilliant team members, and also a major, major cost to taxpayers.
I want to get into that cost a little more here in a second, along with the wider impact of what this investigation sort of leaves behind. But what made headlines last time during your press conference was sort of the back and forth between you guys. There's a history of that via various press conferences. But in this last one that you held, you called the former DA a dirty cop. Do you stand by that characterization of the former DA? And I'd also like you to get a chance to react to what she said about you calling what you were doing kindergarten style name calling.
Yeah, I mean, look, it takes two people, right, to have a fight, to have an argument. And unfortunately, this is something where we learned at some point in November of 2021 that she was investigating our office. We knew nobody had done anything. I kept my staff members. I didn't put them on leave as people recommended and politicians normally do, because I knew they hadn't done anything. And so usually what happens is the politician says, the truth will come to light, and keeps quiet. But I didn't want to do that for the sake of my staff members, for the sake of their reputation, and also because I was running for office. I needed the public to know that this was false. And so that was my reason for that back and forth over the years is, she would leak something false and I would have to correct the record. And so it's not that I wanted to engage in a tit for tat. I don't enjoy that. But it's been a matter of correcting the record. As to, my characterization of her as a dirty cop, I mean, we've heard, for example, of folks in similar roles that are making up evidence or hiding evidence, that are spinning evidence, that are creating cases for motives other than the pursuit of justice. And that exactly fits what she did. For one, misleading the grand jury. I mean, the Attorney General's office, when asked, why did you dismiss this? Their statement said something along the lines of, there was facts and evidence that Kim Ogg did not present. And so I don't know. We'll never know what she said to the grand jury, but obviously it was a tall tale around this. And I think that the most egregious evidence of malfeasance is the warrants that she produced, that Rachel Hooper probably drafted, that then went to a judge and ultimately the Texas Rangers executed. So they showed up to one of my staff members' homes, early morning, lights going, pregnant wife, 5-year-old watching, same with my other two team members. And they were carrying with them a warrant that was promptly leaked. And it made all these accusations that are completely false. And she knew that. I mean, we on our side and our attorneys begged to explain to them that was not true. I even explained it through the press. I mean, there was no way she could pretend like she was misunderstanding things. So that just shows, intentional misleading, twisting of facts. Again, no other purpose of this, unless you say, she wanted to waste taxpayer dollars. I don't think so. I think the only explanation is she wanted to harm me politically. So really that's it. As far as the response to what she said, I think that her characterizing as kindergarten or not kindergarten, you know, that's fine, whatever. I think the real important part of her statement is when she talked about the plea deals, which she characterized as plea deals. There were no plea deals. She's still lying to this moment. I think that is the definition of a dirty cop. And her saying that there's evidence that will never come to light. I mean, okay, why didn't she present that to the grand jury? Why didn't the Republican Attorney General show that? So, um, there's a lot of people in our county jail that is, bursting at the seams, and one of the things that our group that's looking into that has found is that she charged a whole lot of people who end up being found not guilty. And in that case, I don't know if it's sort of to show increased numbers of, prosecutions. I don't know what it is, but it certainly has happened in terms of these cases and other cases she's pursued against people in the county and political opponents, is just going through the circus of indicting somebody, making it really public, and then next thing you know, it's all dismissed. And so what I want to do is to really pull the curtain back on that, and for folks to know that, yes, this happened to me and my staff member, but it's also, there's just so much power the district attorneys have. They choose what the grand jury sees, pretty much. They can just charge somebody with something that they didn't do. And so we have to have district attorneys who have integrity not to do that. And it's on us as the citizens, as the press, to really question, right? Where is the evidence? What's the other side saying? Because ultimately it costs us just so much money.
Let's talk about costs for a little bit. On the agenda, I believe later this week is an agenda item for approval of reimbursement of your legal fees. I think it's somewhere over $672,000 for legal expenses tied to representing you throughout this criminal investigation. That's a whole lot of money. Is that what you're talking about when you talk about impact, taxpayer money that is now a whole chunk of it that is going to have to go to this?
It's a lot more than that. Think about all the attorneys that she had working on this case. Just to see the hourly fee that she was paying this lead Republican Party attorney, Rachel Hooper, enormous amount of money. Think about the communications people she hired to be leaking this every single week. Think about the Texas Rangers, the judges that had to hear this, the police officers. Those there's just so many pieces of this for 3 years. I think it'll be hard to calculate the costs of that, but it's certainly in the millions of dollars. As far as the legal fees, it is such a shame that she has put this burden on the taxpayers. All those dollars that it could have instead gone to, fighting violent crime, going after actual criminals, time in her office. But then also causing those of us on the receiving side to have to hire attorneys and defend against a totally bogus prosecution. And so, it's really unfortunate that we all have to be saddled with that. The reason for that policy is specifically this purpose, and I think the reason why we didn't have a mass exodus of employees during that bogus prosecution investigation is because the various employees knew that they were innocent, and they knew that once that was cleared, that their legal fees would be reimbursed. Otherwise, she would have run us all out of government, all of us she didn't like.
What do you hope taxpayers take away from this? Obviously, they'll follow commissioners' meetings. They'll see this agenda item. They'll see this large sum of money that is going to legal fees that were used to represent the county judge. If you're not involved in the day-to-day of this story, you see that huge whopping number and you think, perhaps that you did do something wrong, that that money is being wasted, and perhaps it's because of something your office did. How do you get that messaging across to taxpayers so they understand why this money has to be reimbursed now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty clear, obviously, if a case is dismissed, and in this case, it's almost poetic justice that it was the Republican Attorney General who dismissed all of this. Clearly, there was no wrongdoing, and as I've said from the beginning, it has been a protracted campaign by her to tarnish my name and that of my staff members. So we had no way to end it. She just dragged it and dragged it and dragged it out. But I want folks to know that that 600,000 plus dollars, that's not the end of the amount. There's the folks who were falsely prosecuted are going to need a reimbursement. The former county administrator was reimbursed also in the six figures. And the attorney that had to produce thousands and thousands of pages for her, for the DA. She's going to have to receive hundreds of thousands of dollars for her legal fees. And then, of course, all the money that Kim Ogg spent, taxpayer dollars, working on this instead of violent crime. And so what I want folks to take away is this is not the way things should be. The fact that we allowed a prosecutor in the fourth largest county in the country, and the third largest county in the country, to do this for 3 years is baffling. And I think it'll help us be a lot more watchful, and that it'll teach a lesson, give an example to other jurisdictions, because this kind of thing does happen. Prosecutors with their outsized power, they can decide what to go after at enormous cost to taxpayers, even when there's nothing there.
I do want to ask you, how concerned were you throughout these last 3 years that you would be criminally charged, knowing, as you suggest, that you were dealing with someone who was politically targeting you?
Yeah, I was. I mean, frankly, I'm not going to say I was surprised that she did not charge me, but it was certainly something that I didn't see as unlikely, and I even said so at the time. And I think that just goes to show again, like, she really, really, really couldn't even like spin the facts to come up with something to charge me with. I think she would have if she could have. But there's just, at least with my staff members, somehow she was able to kind of spin words and take certain things out of context. And I bet there was just no way for her to do that with me. But it was still awful. I mean, as I've gone through this, I've gotten to know people in the community, people that I've known that I didn't know had this background, that have gone through, a situation in terms of they didn't do something, they were indicted, it went away, but just the trauma that causes. And so right now my focus is trying to really educate folks about it so that this kind of thing doesn't happen again, and then work really hard to restore the reputation of my team members. They're really smart. One of them has a PhD in nuclear physics. The other one is an attorney, civil rights attorney. The other one's a Harvard-trained lawyer who worked at McKinsey and Goldman Sachs. They could be doing anything else. Certainly didn't need to steer a contract to make a lot of money. And it's just it's really a shame that this happened to them. And so I see it as a responsibility to also just make it very, very clear for everybody to know, okay, that thing that we heard about over and over again every time she leaked something false, it's over now. It's over now, and there was nothing to it. And that's the end of that.
You've been so outspoken about your struggles with mental health. So I want to ask you this. What role, if any, I don't know, did this prosecution against your team members, the threat maybe hanging over your head, whether you might be charged, what impact, if any, I don't know, did it have on, as you were struggling with mental health issues in the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, this all started before I went on a mental health leave. And so at the time, I didn't even realize that I was struggling with depression and anxiety. And so I'm sure that this was all part of part of the soup that was playing a number on my brain. When I went through the mental health treatment, and the question was like, okay, am I ready to go back? And I had a very specific conversation, I remember, with my team, and they were like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I was like, well, the rogue DA is still there. She could invent something new and come after me, or sure, she could come after me on this. And I mean, it's just horrible. Anyone can imagine, right? Like you're innocent, but people, at some point, you hear it so much, you almost start to wonder. And then we all know there's an innocence project, so innocent people do get convicted sometimes. So it's just a horrible situation to be in. And I remember thinking about it and thinking, yeah, I can handle that. And in fact, right when I came back was when she had that leak. Man, I don't even think I was back a week. Of course, this was not an accident. That she had that leak saying that my staff member had not turned in some documents that he had turned in. And it was great because, I mean, it wasn't great, but the way I handled it really showed me that this was not something that was going to burden my mental health in any significant way, because I spent maybe 30 minutes reviewing the falsehoods, thinking about some talking points, went and cleared the record and moved on to the next thing. And I remember, that night thinking like, okay, yeah, this is, when it's nonsense, it's just politics, and politics gets ugly sometimes. But when it starts costing people's reputations, people's lives, taxpayer dollars to the tune of millions and millions of dollars, that's beyond politics. That's just, I don't think she should be allowed to do this. I mean, that is what should be a crime.
I have one more question. I only have 4 minutes left before this Zoom expires, so I want to get to them quickly. And forgive me if you've already discussed this or maybe announced it already and I may have missed it, but have you made a decision yet on re-election? I know that's been in the news in December.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to make an announcement in the next couple of months. So unfortunately I don't have anything new to say on that. I always said I would do 2 terms, but then I thought, man, I do want to run again, and so now I just want to make sure that's actually what I want.
Okay, so no announcement to break right now.
No, unfortunately.
Okay, and my last question, is there anything that you want to say about this topic or anything else that I may not have addressed?
Oh man, I'm trying to think. Oh, well, there's like this like nice silver lining in all of this, that I realized that when this all started in 2021, David, my husband, and I were broken up. And so of course I had to hire lawyers for the first time in my life. I didn't know who was good and who was bad and who to trust. And so I thought, okay, who's a lawyer that I can trust? And that was him. So I called him and we started working on this together. And then, I mean, he worked countless hours for free. And anyway, that's what brought us back together. And then we got married. So I guess like if there's a silver lining in all of this horrible, horrible nightmare, I realized that is one.
Former DA Kim Ogg has fired back at the judge, accusing her of kindergarten tactics and schoolyard name-calling. She added, quote, Harris County will never have the opportunity to hear the evidence and decide for themselves whether Judge Hidalgo's staff rigged an $11 million COVID contract and what role she played in it. Thanks for joining us on KHOU 11+.